Welcome to the Nature Garden Podcast with me, Carl Steinson, and the Weekending Show team from Lionheart Radio. Thanks for joining us on a canny wee wander down the garden path and country lane with the birds and the bees and the flowers and trees. In this episode, it's peak summer and still wonderfully warm in Northumberland, and Tom P's ripening crops and harvesting potatoes and onions. Tom Cadwallender's turning the calendar page to a new season of birds and checking the owl estuary for avian ins and outs. Steve Lowe's reflecting on the life of someone who inspired him to dive deep into conservation. We celebrate the work of Doctor Angus Lunn, a Northumberland Wildlife Trust stalwart and map maker extraordinaire. Plus some top tips for the garden from Tom P, all coming up on the Nature Garden Podcast. Summer's splendour is all around us, and Tom's here with some super advice on growing sweet peas and how to extend growing times in the garden. Hello, Tom.
Hello. I'm busy in the garden as usual, but we've hit a critical time really. Some plants have finished their growth period. Others are just coming into it and will continue throughout winter. So I was taking a quick look at the flowers, vegetables, fruit and greenhouse work just to see where I am at the moment. It may be of help to you. And our circumstances, of course, with the weather here in North Northumberland. I'm looking at sweet peas. Beautiful display from them this year. We grow them up the cane supports, which are about probably just below 2 meters tall. So instead of planting quite a few young plants in the spring to grow up there freely, cling on with their tendrils to a netting or something that we're fixed or wires, we plant them individually and we send them up an individual cane. This is the way to get beautiful straight-stemmed, long florets, 4 florets to a stem, and the best really. Get the best from them for flower show, challenging, for prizes, or just for the house. But anything that climbs up a cane, be it a runner bean or a sweet pea, it's inevitably going to reach the top at some stage. So let me explain our little setup here. We have 10 canes, or 10 plants on one side, 10 on another. So once they reach the top, we've been tying them in rather than removing their tendrils, not letting them cling on to anything, just tying them in to support them as they climb. And now's the time, for me anyway, to release each one of those ties from the top down to the bottom and lay the whole length of the sweet pea plant out. I do this with 10 one side, 10 the other. And then beginning on one of the sides, I take the first plant and stretch it across the ground to number 6 cane. I take the second plant, stretch it across the ground to number 7 cane. And then the next one, 3, and stretch it across to 8. So it's given, when I tie them in to their respective new canes, they've got all the canes to grow up, plenty of growing time. We call it layering, and it works. So instead of writing them off when they've reached the top of the cane situation, we've got them going up again. And if the weather holds, we'll keep on getting sweet peas until really cold weather comes in, about the October period. Another little tip, I know that dealing with all of the flower heads in the bedding plants, the containers, removing the spent flower heads to encourage more new buds to come and open flowers for us. Same thing with sweet peas. If you allow it, if you take your eye off the ball for about a week, you'll find they're producing pods of peas, with the seed in, of course, for reproduction. Don't let them do that, because once they start doing that, the vigour goes and they stop producing new flowers. Basic stuff, but it works. Some places, Alnwick, for instance, where we're reporting from, Alnwick town is representing this year Northumbria in the town section of National Britain in Bloom. We represented Northumbria last year, and we had a gold medal from our efforts. This year, we're in that competition again, and to keep the judges happy, we've tried to keep all of the flowers going as long as possible. That's the name of the game. But it's not just the summer flowers I'm thinking about. Start thinking autumn and next spring. This is gardening. You have to keep planning ahead. So I'm looking now at the garden centres and local nurseries, and looking at the primula family, the polyanthus, the primroses, etc. They are coming up. They be for sale. Wallflowers, of course, young wallflowers. If you haven't grown them on yourself, keep an eye on the press. And those bulbs as bulbous plants, for some for forcing early indoors and some for planting out. They're on the market as early as this, and to get the best choice of them, so consider bulbs for spring as well. So enjoy your bedding, your flowering plants, keep them going as long as you can, but also plan ahead for next spring.
Late summer's here, and for birders, well, it marks a new season for birds that are moving in or away from our shores. Here's Tom Cadwallender to tell us more.
A couple of days ago, I had the utmost pleasure of giving a presentation to a packed Lesbury Village Hall here in our home place, and the talk was about winter birds on the Northumberland coast, and the talk was well received, thankfully. And one thing that surprised everyone when I said, goodness me, here we are in the first week of August, and I'm talking about winter birds on the Northumberland coast, and a lot of those, or a number of those winter birds, our birds that come here for the winter time, are already here. The first few are already here. In fact, for some species of wading birds, the winter starts, or at least the autumn starts, in kind of end of June. So these birds are coming from an awful long way north. You know, we're talking about the Arctic Circle above north. We're talking about Arctic Canada. We're talking about Siberia. Some of these birds are coming from. So their window of opportunity to breed is quite narrow. So they've got to get their timing really right to make it work for themselves. So sometimes they get caught out. And some of the earlier birds that we get coming through here, birds like sanderling and turnstones, which are coming from an awful long way north, could have been actually failed breeders. So they were arriving. So yes, the idea, the notion of winter birds arriving in kind of early July, back of June, is quite kind of crazy in its own way. But it's not. It's just what happens. We're conditioned to think about our kind of benign sort of summers and benign winters, and it's kind of funny to think about winter when we're still just in early August. But yeah, these birds are coming from really quite inhospitable lands to come down to the kind of much more benign, if you like, areas of the kind of western seaboard of continental Europe. So yes, it's incredible, really. And some of them will actually cross the Greenland to get here. And some of these birds are using the Northumberland coast as a staging post and they're heading even further south. Some of them even getting down into South Africa, and species such as kind of red knot, which are about the size of a glorified blackbird. But in breeding plumage, they are a lovely brick red underneath. And they'll molt through that, and they'll come into a much greyer plumage. And the scientific name is Calidris canuta. So they're named after the king canute, and whether they can actually stop the tide, I do not know. But I suspect not. But they were thought to be able to do so. And the idea that these birds are coming is amazing, actually. These birds are coming from some of the highest points of Arctic Canada. And they're going to be travelling sort of down through Europe and down into Africa for the winter. Journeys of thousands and thousands and thousands of kilometres. It's incredible. It's awe-inspiring. So yes, and on the other side of the coin, on the other side of the continent, or in fact the other side of the world, we have species such as bar-tailed godwit. We get bar-tails coming here for wintertime, and they're coming from, say, Finland and places like that. And but the species or the race that I'm thinking of is actually breeds in Arctic North America and Alaska. And those birds are wintering in Tasmania, and they're travelling south across the Pacific Ocean. So they're travelling. So they fill themselves up, they puff themselves right, they fill up, and all their pectoral muscles are all kind of bulked up, and off they set. So they'll fly for 7 to 10, even 11 days non-stop until they get to their winter quarters in Tasmania and New Zealand. They're absolutely exhausted, really exhausted. But they'll make their way, and this knowledge is gained through sort of satellite tracking. We know them. We know they do this amazing journey for this amazing thing. So it's incredible, actually, when you think about it, how these birds will travel.
Summer vegetables are all systems go, and, well, some are going over. So Tom P's ripening his onions and managing the harvest. And he's taking some sensible steps to deter a rather plucky pheasant.
My gardening embraces, as I'm sure yours does, embraces vegetables and fruit, and the greenhouse, of course. So at the moment, it's the vegetables. I mentioned earlier, some of them have given up their season. And look at the onion bed, for example. I love growing fairly large onions to store them for winter. But just about 2 weeks ago, beginning of August, some of the tops, the growing tops, the foliage, were just bending over. That's the onion plant telling me, okay, that's it. That's as big as I'm going to grow. I'm going to sit here and ripen off. Or you can help me if you can. If it could talk, that's what it would say. So, of course, I grow the big Kelsay show onion. That's Kelsae, Kelsay, a Scotland-based one. And it's a beauty. It's a large onion, can be a very large onion, but it's also very sweet and tender to eat. And it stores well. The trick now is they've finished their growth period and the tops are going over. If they haven't, they're still going. I'll just give the tops a little bend, the growing tips, and the foliage over, and just ease the plant up. It'll come up fairly easily from the soil, so the roots are coming out of the soil, and I'll leave it for a few days in the sun to start the ripening process. Now you can remove some of the tips if you wish, some of the growth on the top, as some people do when they're going to put them on display in one of these competitive onion shows we have in this neck of the woods. Very good. Also, you can just let the tops die off naturally if you wish. But one thing for sure, don't leave them lying around too long on the garden. I have a little setup where they're tied in a bunch, the foliage, and they're put under cover so the rain doesn't fall on them in an open fronted shed or something of that nature, overhanging. Or if you really want to ripen them off as quickly as possible, get a box and get some straw from corn, when there's been corn collected at a local farm or something, go to a stable, get some straw from there and put them in the open top box with some straw, and that helps to ripen them off. They'll go into storage and they'll last all through the winter. Of course, we feel the necks of them because that's where the rot tends to start, the necks and the base. If the base is sound and the neck is fairly tough and stiff, it's not too soft, then they should store over winter. I'm thinking about the potatoes as well. I grow early potatoes, the first early varieties. They started, they needed about 10 to 12 weeks growth. We started digging them in June of this year, and we're still digging them, and we're leaving them in the soil for the moment. There's a big problem though. We have a pheasant which comes in throughout winter into the garden, a local male pheasant, a cock pheasant, and we feed it grain. Now, it's biting the hand that feeds it, unfortunately. It started last year, digging up, scratching up the potatoes, taking a few pecks from one, which spoils that particular tuber, and then moving on to another. Well, it's just started its game of excavating our potatoes. So I spread a net across for a couple of weeks, but now's the time to think about another pest of potatoes in the soil, and that one is called a keeled slug. It's a slug. It has a shape a bit like the keel of a boat. This is where it gets its common name from. It starts going into the soil and burrowing into potatoes. So, folks, it's time to lift your early potatoes. Those ones have been serving you since June through July and now into August. Lift them, leave them for a couple of hours on the surface in the daylight, and then get them into a bag or into an open vessel in a garage or something of this nature, free from frost, plenty of air getting in, but no light, of course, or very little light. And they'll store in there for some time. So those are two of the main fruits I'm thinking about at the moment. The third one comes in the greenhouse. That's the tomatoes. They can't go on forever. Most of them are formed now, so I've taken the decision to stop the crop altogether, pull the plants out, harvest the crop, and they go into a spare room. Put them out or spread them out in the light on the spare room on the floor in the house, that is. Could be the garage, of course. And even the little ones, green, the size of your thumb, they will ripen through time. And you know what to do to ripen them up. You put a banana in beside them, a couple of bananas if you wish. And the ethylene gas, the ripening gas it gives off, helps to ripen those tomatoes. I think it's time for a cup of tea, Carl.
I'm Tom Heap from Countryfile, and you're listening to the Nature Garden podcast.
Steve Lowe's paying tribute this week to an inspirational figure in conservation, Doctor Angus Lunn, MBE, a Northumberland Wildlife Trust legend who mapped Kielder before modern tech and recorded areas of important habitat across the county.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all well. Today I wanted to reflect on somebody who had a major influence on me as a young ecologist when I first joined Northumberland Wildlife Trust way back in the late 1970s. I mean, I was relatively new to the area, to be honest, but I got interested in wildlife and became involved with the Wildlife Trust as a volunteer. And a person that I work with an awful lot from that point on really was Doctor Angus Lunn. Now, sadly, we lost Angus this week, and it just made me reflect more than normal on how much you actually pick up from people who have the same passions as yourself. Angus was a lovely guy, and he was a particularly good ecologist and geologist as well. His speciality was to deal with quaternary geology, which is all the glaciation. But he could turn his hand to all sorts of things. And one of my first jobs in wildlife conservation was actually working on the Border Mires, which is a set of peatlands in the sort of Kielder area, over also into the sort of northwest of the county, and into Cumbria. And a lot of these mire sites had actually been very badly damaged by forestry ploughing. And Angus and I worked very closely together to come up with a set of criteria by which we could actually work out where they'd been, how much had been damaged, and the relative conservation value of each and every one of them. Now, believe it or not, and this is in the days before sat-nav and really good transport and communications and everything, Angus had walked almost every inch of Kielder and mapped it by hand. He had his own code for doing it, and he produced some superb maps that actually showed where sphagnum moss was, where peatland started, where trees were, etc., etc. And without that, my job in the early 80s would have been so much more difficult, because I was asked to look at up to 90 peatland sites, some of which had already been recognised, but where the boundaries of them were incorrect, and a number of them that had thought to have been lost, as I say, to forestry following the afforestation of the area post-war. And it was amazing to have the opportunity to get out there, firstly, crack of dawn in most cases, up into the middle of Kielder. You never saw a soul for most of the day. But I was following some of the maps that Angus had produced and ground truthing it. Now, in the end, we got all of this information together. We had a Border Mires committee. It was these sites were called the Border Mires, and now, many, many years later, I'm very proud to say that the vast majority of these have actually been designated as sites of special scientific interest, as internationally important peatlands. And that, as I say, that work could not have been done without the benefit of obviously many, many hours in the field, but also the knowledge and guidance of Angus. Angus also, first and foremost, Angus was a key part of the Northumberland Wildlife Trust conservation programme for decades, and without his knowledge, then the wildlife of the county would have been so much less. But so he's done all sorts of things, like looking at how we should select and designate, I should say, sites of local value, sites of regional value, sites of national value, as well as a number of the species that the county is particularly important for. Now, without Angus, again, we wouldn't have been as aware of the importance of, for instance, of wind grassland, which is a habitat that's absolutely unique to Northumberland. And we also, ancient woodland was a key thing that Angus was particularly keen on, and we worked together on producing criteria for selection of ancient woodland sites, because most of the work on ancient woodlands have been done in the south of England. And Angus actually sat down and came up with a list of plants that should be found in our ancient woodlands in the northeast, not necessarily those that would be found elsewhere in the country. So again, a monumental piece of work. And I'll be honest with you, I couldn't list the number of things that Angus was responsible for. Obviously, not just himself, but also in regards to working with other people. And I know that a number of certainly know that the county is going to be all the more poorer for his absence. And all my hearts goes out to his family and friends, and I hope that they recognise the value in the same way that I do. If anyone wants to become more familiar with the county, but also with Angus, you can do no worse than get a copy of the New Naturalist's Guide to Northumberland, which was produced by Collins, and I've got a pristine copy which is thankfully with a signature on from Angus, and I did get an acknowledgement in there, but it's odd to think it was first published in 2004. That's 20 odd years ago, and I have to say I just had a quick look at one of the photographs, and I'm actually in it, and I've got hair, so that tells you how long ago that was. So yeah, as I say, people could do worse than have a look at that. It tells you all about the geology, the physiography, the climate, the soils, land use, vegetation, the flora and the fauna, all of which actually go up to make such a fantastic county that we've got, with its own unique natural history. We've obviously got a national park, 2 areas of outstanding natural beauty, as they were called. We've got the fantastic coast, we've got the Pennines. And I have to say, once again, the county is going to be so much poorer without Angus in it.
And the guidebook Steve mentioned is the New Naturalist's Guide to Northumberland by Doctor Angus Lunn. Now, for some of us, 24 hours is a long time flying, but for birds, a long one might be 10 days or more. Tom Cadwallender's taking notes on the birds that are changing places and the salvation of short stopping.
We're seeing birds on the move already. You know, we're as humans, we're hardly got into our summer holidays, and birds are on the move. And here, where I am on the coast in Northumberland, near Almouth, on the Aln estuary, the numbers of birds are building up quite nicely, and we've got lapwings. Lapwings are plovers, but they're very familiar because they will breed in our area. However, when it comes to the winter time, the numbers are supplemented. In fact, a lot of the breeding birds are replaced by these continental migrants coming down from northern Europe to spend the winter here. And these birds are coming in July. We've got something like 250 or even 300 lapwings just floating around in the salt marsh of the Aln estuary. And another species that does this is the kind of the emblem of Northumberland National Park, which is the curlew, the Eurasian curlew, long decurved bill, and a species which, as a breeding species, is under a huge amount of pressure. And in fact, a lot of the curlew species, and there's a few of them across the world, and they're all under some sort of pressure or another. And it's really because of kind of loss of habitat and predators and all that sort of business. And the curlews are here as well. These birds come across from Finland. And what happens is the kind of, I'm sure we have the upland breeding birds in this part of the world. They'll come to the coast and they're first sort of leaving of the uplands. And then they'll move away down into the southwest and perhaps even into Ireland, perhaps even into continental Europe. And that gap is then filled by birds coming over from Finland, particularly, and yes, we have 200 to 300 of them here. But across the whole of the whole kind of Northumberland coast, we'll have several thousands of them easily, perhaps even up to 20,000 of these birds kind of are here for the duration, which is quite something. But yes, and the numbers are building up here in kind of mid-August. And by the time I speak to you next, the autumn migration will be in full flow. In fact, many of our winter visitors will be in place now for the kind of the course of the winter. But it's interesting to note that some of these birds will actually move on through species like sanderling and ring plover. They will be heading south from here. Some of them will not stay. Some of them will be moving on. They'll just be staging, as it's called, staging here before they move further south. And a similar proposition happens in Scandinavia. There's a species called purple sandpiper, which is a grey little wading bird, really tough as old boots. And they will spend their time on rocky shores, and they really are rocky shore specialists. And these birds will come to the Northumberland coast, and they traditionally have come here. Normally they would arrive sometime in September, but more recently they've been staying away and not arriving until kind of October time. But they're still leaving their breeding grounds in Svalbard. They're leaving their breeding grounds at the right time, but they're dropping onto the Scandinavian coast, North Norway coast, and they're gradually making their way south, only pushed on by the oncoming winter. And they're going to be moved on, and this phenomenon is known as short stopping. They're not making the major arduous journey unless they really have to, and they're only pushed on by the oncoming winter. And this is they're allowed to do that by the fact that climate change is upon us. Climate change is real. I've no doubt. People will deny it, but actually it is real, and we're seeing this in the signs of birds sort of adapting. Some birds will not be able to adapt, but some birds will be able to, and we're now seeing it. And this principle of behavioural change, of short stopping, is a direct result of climate change. So it's quite interesting to see how that whole thing pans out. And it's fascinating. As an ornithologist, it is absolutely fascinating. And as an observer, and I've been kind of observing and recording, noting changes, populations over the last 50 plus years on the Northumberland coast. And it is fascinating. There's winners and there's losers. And currently we're seeing a few more losers than we are winners. But, you know, the balance of probability will be all right. And at this time, we're seeing kind of other species change and move on. And, you know, the kind of the summer breeding birds we have here are the guillemots and the razorbills and the much celebrated puffin. And these are going to be heading off. In fact, the puffins have almost all gone. And whilst the guillemots and the razorbills spend their time in the North Sea basin, puffins will actually head out into the North Atlantic for the winter. Amazing, really, when you think about such a smallish bird as a puffin to spend their time in the North Atlantic. So, yeah, here we are basking in kind of fairly pleasant August weather. And yet we know the signs of winter are on the way. So not to depress you too much, folks. But yes, there's glory in this kind of migration. And observe. Don't worry about it. Just observe it. I get a great thrill about watching things change over the years. And it gives me a buzz whenever I think about it. Migration is an amazing thing. Anyway, there we are, folks. I hope you've enjoyed this kind of these last few weeks of my podcast, or my participation in the podcasts with my esteemed colleagues. And hopefully I will see you or hear you and speak to you in the back end of this autumn. Great stuff. And gan canny, folks, and all the best.
And so, to the sound of War Blackbird, here's Tom with some things to be getting on with in the garden.
So it's jobs for the week time. And I've been thinking about the greenhouse, which I just mentioned recently, losing the tomato crop. It was time to lift it, green ones, red ones, ripe ones, all of it. It had done its job, and the leaves were starting to fade. Most of them had gone anyway. So we rescued the crop, and they're ripening off with the banana, 2 bananas, in a spare room in the house. And they're taken care of. But I hate wasting space. And there's a whole greenhouse border there crying out for some plants to grow in it. We're still in summertime, for goodness sake, and there's plenty of warmth in there. So we've been sowing lettuce in batches outside, leaf lettuce that is, throughout the summer. And by this time, all this sun, if we didn't keep up with the watering, you tend to get a little bit bitterness coming into them. And this comes anyway as the crop starts to mature. So we'll keep on sowing it. It's time to get some more lettuce sown, but this time in the greenhouse border, just in little rows. Doesn't take much. Get them sown, water the row first, make some little drills with the back of a rake, soak the drill, put the seed in, rake a bit of the soil back on top and soak it again and leave the rest to nature. They will germinate within two weeks or so. They'll start growing and they look so so lightweight. These leaves of salad bowl or Lolo Rosso, the red one, both of them are good, lasting over winter, but they toughen up very quickly. And by the time we're into September, October, the temperature may go down one evening, way down to close on zero in late October and November. They just keep on growing, and we give them water occasionally, and they remain fresh. Now, the other option, which we keep open, is at the moment we have some early outdoor croissants, and they're just starting to grow. Just starting to flower. They've been growing for some time. We planted them out in May, actually, and so they won't all flower before the weather starts to close in. So when they're in bud, I simply lift them from the garden. They're in one of the beds in the garden, and I dig a little hole for them in the greenhouse border and water them well in, and they continue there with no wind, no rain, under control growth, and some of them stretch up toward late November, even December, in that environment. So there's another option for you. Get that greenhouse border used. Yet another is, at the moment, I see in the garden centre some potatoes, generally called second cropping potatoes. They're first early potatoes, which have been kept over cool conditions, and they haven't had a chance to start shooting. Well, they will be shooting now, but they're just in packs, and they're on sale at the local garden centre. You can get about 6 to 8, maybe 10 tubers in a pack, and bearing in mind that it's about 10 or 12 weeks growth they need from planting to maturity. They're selling them as usual as potatoes for Christmas. And I do this everywhere. Yeah, I've been doing it for many years now, and it's just a lovely thing to do. Fill a pot or something, half fill a pot rather, with compost or some garden soil if you're stuck. Put 3 into a large pot, and then fill them up the top gradually as the shoots come up, and keep them outdoors. I do throughout the rest of this month into September. In fact, you don't need to plant them until September if you wish. You've still got 10 to 12 weeks growth before Christmas. So leave them outside, but when October comes in the cooler nights, move them into the cold green or unheated greenhouses, which is what we have. They grow on. The foliage might start to weaken. You've watered them, might start to collapse about the end of November period. So just remove that, and you've got your potatoes already grown, and you've got fresh potatoes for Christmas dinner. Now that's the thing. And I just love doing that with 2 or 3 pots of potatoes every year. Final word, look out for those wasps. They're graduated from the plums recently onto the raspberries. And now they've just discovered the apples are ripening in the garden. And there's nothing worse than seeing one side of an apple, which is beautifully ripe, and putting a bare hand on to pick it, and soon discovering the other side of it has 10 or 12 wasps foraging on the inside. Oops, watch for that. Whatever you're doing in the coming weeks, enjoy your gardening.
You've been listening to gardener Tom Pattinson, birder Tom Cadwallender from the British Trust for Ornithology, and Steve Lowe from the Cresswell Peel Tower. I'm Carl Steinson, thanks for listening, and we will be back in the autumn as we take a wee break. Do enjoy your gardening and time outdoors with nature. Bye for now, and we'll see you in the autumn.